Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Adam and Matt to talk about Goodfellas. This is the story of Henry Hill and his life in the mafia, covering his relationship with his wife Karen and his mob partners Jimmy Conway and Tommy DeVito. That's the IMDb. It does not at all capture. I mean, it's accurate, but that's like the worst synopsis of Goodfellas I've ever heard in my life. I'm really enjoying the IMDb entrance because it's giving us a chance to comment on these synopses.
Inadequate.
Yeah, that's just pitiful. That's like somebody did not watch the movie, or they watched it and they found it to be grueling and didn't appreciate it, so they wrote, they wrote as sterile of a description of the film as they possibly could. What Goodfellas is famous for is getting you into like the bowels of the mafia. It's like real street level. It's probably the or one of the most authentic depictions of the mafia, and it's also, I think, arguably somebody might say The Godfather, but I think this is the best mafia movie ever made. I mean, it's my favorite movie. So and also its impact. Like if you watch The Sopranos, it's like there's a ridiculous number of actors that were from Goodfellas that have roles in The Sopranos. I think it's like 17. It might be more. And it also had a huge influence on the writing of that show. That was one of the reasons he wrote the show was because of Goodfellas. So
post 1990, if you cast any kind of mafia person in a movie, you just looked at the cast of Goodfellas and started there. That was the way it worked.
But it was definitely and this is something that that the guy who wrote Sopranos talked about. But if you look at like Godfather, that's a great movie. Don't get me wrong. But it's very removed from reality in a lot of ways. It's much more stylized and much more. Those are very refined gangsters, and it's got an operatic quality to it that's not what Goodfellas is about. Goodfellas is much more in the dirt. You feel every element of it feels like a real kitchen table, if that makes sense. It just has a much more, just a much more authentic vibe to it. Whereas, Godfather feels like that was still a period of time where there was not a whole lot of understanding about the mafia. It was sort of based on, like the Valachi papers and things like that, like things that like information that was coming to light, but you can still tell that there's like a distance from the, and maybe not just that. Also, I think Mario Puzo was trying to do something higher with Godfather when he wrote it, because it does have this sort of mythical quality to it. I'm not trying to knock The Godfather. I'm just saying that Goodfellas is a way different movie, and to me a much more I can watch The Godfather like once every 10 years, but Goodfellas is a movie I can comfortably watch once a year if I want to. I probably watch it every 2 or 3 years.
Even without getting into the mafia angle of it. I mean, as someone that lives in New Jersey, it's just like the characters, it just feels very authentically Italian American in a way that the Godfather doesn't.
I would agree.
It's like Henry Hill cooking his food and stuff. It's just like, I totally see this. There's just so many little details.
Well, no, and growing up in an Italian family, I would say the same thing. It's very, it's very like when they're making the sauce and all of those things, when they're eating, when they're the way that food is so at the center of everything that they're doing, and also the attention to detail, like stuff like he put too many onions in the sauce. I know exactly what he means by that. Do you know what I mean? That's there's one pot of sauce for everybody in the family, and if the person making it likes to put too much onion in or whatever. I even remember the scene where he's doing the garlic, where he shaves the garlic down. I used to try to do that with a razor blade after seeing the movie for years, and I never got it to liquefy in the pan. So I don't know if I was doing it wrong or if it's just an impossibility based on cinematic deception. But the thing is, it does feel like when they go to his mother's house, the way that they interact with each other, it's obviously a mafia movie, but it's also very much about, like Italian American families and Italian American culture, and you can feel that. And The Godfather's about that too, but it also has characters that just feel really out of place for that environment, right? Like even even Marlon Brando, he's not Italian, and he comes on like I love him in that role, but he's definitely nothing like any of like the older Italian
feels
men.
Much more convincing as a mafia boss type person to me than it's like he feels. It's like I mean, not like I said, he just has such an authenticity to him.
Well, down to like the pizzeria that they're operating out of, right? It's just that the like all of the environmental stuff feels a little more appropriate. His mannerisms feel more appropriate. The way they interact with each other feels more appropriate. I do think that's true. And again, it's not knocking Godfather because I think Godfather is trying to do something.
Good movie.
Yeah,
it's just doing. Yeah, as you say, it's just a different kind of movie.
But yeah, so I mean, we've kind of already jumped into the conversation. We barely, I guess, for those who don't know, Goodfellas. It came out in 1990. It was a pretty big deal when it came out, and it's really, I think, I don't know if it's considered Scorsese's best film, but it's definitely like in his top 3. I consider it his best movie, but I'm sure there are people that it's your favorite too. Matt, what's your feeling on that? Like, where would you rank Goodfellas?
Yeah, I think it is his best movie. I think he's in total control with that movie. It's the ending was just
it's one of those movies you don't even need
movie. Yeah, I would say it's his best.
One of the things I like about it is you don't need to know a lot about filmmaking to know that the craftsmanship is there. And there's like you'll hear people all the time who they're just regular folks. They don't pay attention to like the details of how a movie is crafted, but they'll talk about the craft of this movie because it sort of stands out. And it doesn't stand out in a way that feels, I don't know what the word is, like sophomoric.
It's not
or anything.
Overly flashy. Yeah. There's like, it's like when a movie is directed in a way where the director's trying to wow you and they're doing tricks for the sake of like. There's a lot of flashiness to this movie, but it's all earned. It's all to a purpose.
Yeah, like everything. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. I'm done. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like from obviously it begins in the middle. But that scene where they go back to him as a kid, and the first thing you see is like his eye, and just that the way I've never seen an eyeball shot like that before in a movie. I'm sure he's referencing some other movie, but it was really intriguing, and it also really plays into the idea of this being a film through the eyes of that character, but you're kind of getting it at a skewed angle. It's not the normal perspective. You know what I mean? And then just all the other things, like you were saying, the editing. One that people often talk about is when he's making the dinner and he's doing the drug runs and the cops are after him and everything's edited so tightly. And the narration is like, it sounds like he's had 8 cups of coffee when he's narrating it. And it's just very...
the editing's almost choppy at that point. It's just in a way that it's a little bit off almost, which really gives you that feeling of being frazzled and paranoid. It's fantastic.
And of course, the scene where they go through the Copacabana, that's obviously very famous. Actually, my favorite part of that scene is the fact that they literally a table materializes for him and they put it down. That's the part of that scene that always impressed me. But yeah, it's perfectly shot. It's great use of music. I have heard people complain about it, so I know not everybody's a fan, but I really like how music is used in this movie to kind of give you a sense of time and place, but also mood. Like when they're killing Billy Bats, and what's the name of the song, the Beneath the Ocean song? I can't remember the
Across the Sea, or what am I doing? God.
Yeah, I can't remember the name, but you know what I'm talking about.
It's Across the Sea, I think.
But
it's Bobby Darin's song, I know, but let me look.
Yeah, but the point that I'm making is it atmospherically, the sound
Beyond
of
the Sea.
Beyond the Sea. Thank you.
I knew I had it slightly off.
Atmospherically it works, but it's also invoking this idea of sleeping with the fishes that is in the back of you don't even realize it, but it's like worming its way into the back of your mind. And it applies both to Billy Bats and to them because they're crossing this line that is potentially going to get them into trouble. So, those kind of touches are, what make the movie so great. So yeah, I don't know where we want to begin with our proper, just now that we've kind of just sort of plowed into, or stumbled into it. But What was everybody? Did you guys see this in the theater when it came out, or did you guys see it after on video? What was your experience with the movie?
No, I started college in 1990, and that I we were actually Matt and I talked about this. I was like, I only saw 3 movies that year, and
Okay.
they were Nightbreed, Total Recall, and Miller's Crossing. Those were the only
Okay.
movies I saw in theaters that year, just because college kind of threw me off my usual weekly movie watch that I used to do in high school.
Matt, how about you?
Yeah, it was in the theater very short amount of time. It did middling business, and I knew somebody who went and saw it, and they talked about it and such, but I didn't see it until it was on video.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see it in the theater either. I remember I was in, I think, 7th grade when it came out, and my teacher, Mr. Martino, my like homeroom teacher, came in and he was like, "Guys, I just saw Goodfellas, and it was the best movie ever." And so that was like the first time it got on my radar. And then I went to my cousin Justin's house, like, I don't know, months later when it first came out on video. And they had that, it was like that double VHS cassette type deal. And they sat
Yeah.
us down in front of the TV and put Goodfellas on because we were the kids or whatever. And I just remember the moment that scene comes on where he says, like, as long as I can remember, as far back as I remember, I've always wanted to be a. That was the thing that like sucked me into the movie.
Yeah,
And then I was just transfixed by it. But it wasn't until years later that I realized how good of a movie it was, because at that time I was just interested in the character, the story. I didn't have a deep appreciation of the visuals of film as a medium, and I didn't really know who Martin Scorsese was, so I didn't really understand much of the context of the movie. But obviously years later, I, through repeat viewing or whatever, you got more of an appreciation. But yeah, I think this is just I don't know. I read the book too. It's been a long time. I read the book. I want to say in like 2009 was when I read it.
I did too.
What did you think of the book?
It's excellent. It's probably the best on the mafia, Italian mafia that exists. It's all true. He was on the witness protection program for turning on his old buddies, and I think he's Irish. He was Irish American. Henry Hill died not too long ago.
He's Irish. He's
2 or 3 years ago.
He's half Irish, half Italian, I believe.
Yeah, his mother, according to the movie, at least his mother's from
so.
Sicily. Well, his mother's family's from Sicily. They bring that up.
I'm pretty sure that's true. Let me look him up though, just to make sure I'm not getting that wrong.
Well, yeah, I'm going by the movie. I don't know if there were any liberties.
I think it's the same as in the movie.
Yeah,
his father was Irish. His mother was from Sicily.
It's the same.
But yeah, that I think.
The DVD, starting with the DVD. Oh, sorry. Starting with the DVD, they had put on a commentary track with Henry Hill and Nick Pileggi.
Okay.
So you can find out what the differences are.
Oh, that's okay. I haven't heard that before. I have. I've seen interviews with him, and I've seen interviews with Nick Pileggi, but I haven't heard that commentary track. I think that what's interesting to me about the movie and the book is he apparently wrote another book that doesn't have that kind of editing, and I took a look at it, and it's kind of a mess. And so it's very interesting to me that like it shows that there was a lot of skill that went into taking those interviews with him and turning them into the book Wise Guy and making it so readable. And the same with the movie. You know what I mean? But like you said, it's based on reality. They changed some names. They changed I think Jimmy Conway was really Jimmy Burke, and Paul Cicero was Paul Vario, and Tommy DeVito, which is, I think, the weirdest change because it immediately brings Danny DeVito to mind. Was like Tommy DeSimone. The other big difference is Tommy DeSimone was like 6'2" or something in real life. So he was this big giant guy. But I think that for the movie, making him be more like Joe Pesci actually worked out really well. I think that was the right choice.
It's probably Pesci's signature performance, really. So
So I guess one thing I wanted to talk about, because I do have a lot of notes on this, was that this kind of came out in like the Wonder Years era of voiceovers and nostalgia. And I know in other episodes of our podcast with other people, we've talked about voiceovers. And I think for younger people, there is this narration is considered bad by a lot of, like, I'm noticing that.
It always has been to an extent. I mean, the thing is, it's something that you have to be careful in using because it's usually terrible. It's just,
okay.
This is, I mean, it's one of those things. It's an ingredient you want to be really careful in adding to your movie, and it's like, yeah, Scorsese pulls it off in this, but
well, I would say I don't quite feel that way. Like I think that narration. I mean, obviously you can do bad, just like you can do bad music and you can do bad dialogue and you can do bad anything.
Well, yeah,
but I feel like narration, it's part of the medium, just like it's part of the soundscape, and it's one of those things where I grew up in an era where there was a lot of narration on television, on movies. Like there were Woody Allen movies that had stuff like this. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. It might have been Radio Days, but I might have the name wrong. There were a lot, Christmas Story. There were a lot of movies that really prioritized the narration. The narration was part of the art of it. And so when I go back to a movie like Goodfellas, it's like doing that at the highest possible level.
Remember though, there already were a lot of examples of hatred of like Blade Runner was one. People complained about the voiceover in Dune and all of that.
Dune I get. Dune I understand why.
Yeah,
it's done very weirdly.
Those are both bad. Yeah. Those are both terrible voiceovers.
I haven't seen Blade Runner in a long time, so I can't comment on that one. But I mean, I don't mind.
The problem with the Blade Runner one is that because it was made afterwards by the studio, it's negating what's happening in the scene. It's like, like the final voiceover, I never understood why he did any of that. It's like, wow, the movie was a total waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that, I mean, there are plenty of examples
to my life.
There are plenty of examples of it done badly. I'm just saying, I think it often does add to it. Like, again, the Wonder Years wouldn't have worked without the narration. Or
no, it generally. I mean, the thing is, voiceover. 90% of the time, someone uses it, it's because it's a crutch. It's like I can't figure out a way to tell this story, so I don't know. I'm just going to have someone explain it to the audience. Or in the case of Blade Runner, it's the studio going, people won't understand this. Let's explain this to the audience. But
if it's part of the foundation of it, which I think makes sense. Like in the case of Goodfellas, I think one of the reasons it makes sense is the book is written that way. If you read the book, it's like, oh, this sounds a lot like the movie. You know what I mean?
I was about to say, books are often, they give you a chance to put the narration in there. Like you actually get to hear the writer's voice, which I think books are often an exception to the no narration rule. But
and I think that's generally true in this case, where you get the voice of Henry Hill in that narration, or Nick Pileggi. I don't know which one of them is more responsible for this the style of that book, but because I do suspect there was a lot of editing and crafting going on in there. But I guess the thing that I found interesting this time watching it was just how crucial that narration is to like again, like that scene that we were talking about earlier where he gets more agitated in the narration. You can hear his voice kind of speeding up and it's matching the stuff on screen. It's really the thing that pulls you in. Like I said, the thing that drew me into the movie was him saying, that he always wanted to be a gangster. And it's like the way he says it. And also the juxtaposition of, so the movie starts in the middle, which in this case I think was a pretty brilliant choice, where they're taking Billy Batts out to be buried, and he's not dead yet. He's still in the trunk, and they hear it. They think they hit something or whatever, and they pull over. And it's the juxtaposition of this really violent execution of the still alive Billy Batts, where they stab him and then they shoot him, and then he closes the trunk, and he's like, that's when he says it, and it's just it really kind of gets it sort of. I think the heart of this movie is. But I know, Matt, I saw that there was some reference to this in the chat, but I didn't really quite catch it because I was in the middle of something. But there's this glamour of the mafia that Martin Scorsese obviously has an attraction.
Oh, shit.
Do you know what I mean? Like there's like there's something appealing about it to him, and I can appreciate that. But there's also in the back of his mind, but it means you have. What was that?
He grew up in Little Italy. He saw those guys up close.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, is that it's something that he saw, and he but what I'm saying is he had this attraction to it, but he also understood that it came at the cost of his soul. And so that's the part that makes it a fascinating movie to me.
It's like I said, I agree with you. It really pulls you in with the attraction and then hits you over the head with how bad all this stuff, how it ultimately destroys you. I mean, it's fantastic. Because, I mean, a lot of times with cautionary tales, they're too wary of actually pulling in the attractive side of it. And it's like, it really, really works on both angles here. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think that, and it also, it doesn't do the thing either where, like, a lot of times, something about the way that it shows how his life falls apart is not done in a way where it feels like he doesn't get his comeuppance, really. Do you know what I mean? It's not like he goes to jail.
He gets away with it. He gets it with the witness protection. But I mean, the thing is, I mean, honestly, it's almost the witness protection almost saves him to an extent, because it's like he's like on coke. He's all like, he's just falling apart. He's in a really bad way leading up to that arrest. It's fascinating. But because one more part on the narration too. I think one reason the narration works is this is a movie, there's always a thing about too much exposition. You get into science fiction a lot. It's like, oh, well, a lot of exposition is bad in science fiction or whatever. It's like explaining things, literally explaining it. But this movie is someone explaining things to you. It's like that is at the core of the movie, is I am going to tell you what life in the mafia is like. So it's the exposition it's not clunky, because this movie is exposition as much as anything else.
That's a very good point. And it's a world that we don't get to see we don't get a glimpse into that world like that. It's not something where they're writing books about what now they are, but back then it was very difficult to sort of see that,
This is, if someone wants to know about the mafia, this is like one of the first things you look at. You're like, go watch Goodfellas and move on from there.
The other thing I like about this movie too is the foreshadowing that it does. It does a lot of so like there's a lot of it, like a lot. But the two examples that really leap out at me are, number one, when they're the I'm funny how scene, where the story he's telling is about how he is being questioned by the cops and he's not giving them information, and then when Henry is sort of busting his chops again with the you're funny thing, and he says, I'm not so sure about you, you might fold under questioning. It foreshadows that he will fold under questioning. But there's also a scene that I almost never noticed before, where the restaurant owner is talking about how Henry knows everything about the restaurant business, and he's trying to convince Paulie that he'd make like he can handle everything, and he says if he spends any more time here, he'll be a stool. And it's like, okay, that's obviously like a foreshadowing like that. Like there's just so many little things like that, and it's done very artfully.
Well, just the opening scene too. It's not obviously they're doing a flash forward to show you, oh, there's going to be drama and action. Wait till we get past this section with him as a kid. But it's also, that is a very, as you say, that's a very notable murder. That's them burying a made man that they have killed. This isn't just, it's a very significant scene. You don't really understand the significance of till much later. And that's, well, at least the Tommy getting killed and everything basically falling apart at the end. So,
And it's also at a time when I think a lot of people didn't know what being made even meant, really. Like it was so it's a very interesting introduction to the idea of it. I mean, they mentioned it in The Godfather and stuff like that too, but I don't feel like when I first saw it, this was the first time I really kind of was exposed to that as a concept. But you
guys want to know what the difference between those? Yeah, the difference between The Godfather and Goodfellas is The Godfather is bureaucratic. is it a syndicate? But Goodfellas is the soldiers level.
Yeah.
The guys who had to go out and do the dirty work, basically.
Yep. And they're
That's
guys
the
that are,
difference.
and Henry Hill's someone that's never going to get made. It's like it's never going to, he and Jimmy, they're outside. They're never going to rise to the top. It's impossible.
Yeah, he's always going to be an associate of the mob. He's never going to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not even the guy who actually almost becomes a soldier of the mafia ends up getting shot when he's being inducted because it's so the other thing this movie does really well, Donnie Brasco also did it really well years later. Like they kind of took that idea and ran with it. But this was the first movie that made me super paranoid about the idea of somebody being whacked in a mafia movie. Like in the Godfather, you could kind of see that sort of thing coming, and it was done in a very dramatic way. But this was the first movie where it's like at least for me, I'm sure there were other films, but the first movie I remember where it's like a guy goes and sits in a car on his way to get some pastries, and somebody just stabs him in the back of the neck very nonchalantly, and it's like, whoa, and they're just so casual about it. It's very it's very disturbing, but also it really amplifies all the tension and the fear and this idea that becomes very important in the movie, which is once they target you to be hit, it could come from any direction and you don't know where. And there's this super paranoia about it that works very great on the screen.
Your best buddy.
Yeah, your best buddy. They could be offering you some swag in the side of a building. You know what I like about that? So the scene where the wife goes and she runs away because she thinks that Jimmy is going to have her killed. Yeah. The thing that's fun about that scene is you don't like. I've watched that scene a lot, and I'm always wondering, is he really going to kill her, or is that the thing that triggers him to decide to have them?
I know. It's it's so the ambiguity of that scene is fantastic.
Because it could be. I mean, it looks like both. It looks like what I would expect. Stolen clothing to sort of be, these two big guys with boxes, but it also looks like they were there to kill her. So you don't really know. And Jimmy's behavior during the scene it could be read either way as well. So but yeah, so I don't know, what other scene should we be discussing here? I want to make sure we cover everything. What about the scene where she goes to the building?
Well,
go ahead, Matt.
Oh no, go for it, man.
No, I was just gonna say, the scene where the girlfriend's apartment, where she goes there and she tells everybody there's a whore living in apartment 2R. Yeah. That scene, I don't know why, but I always felt like something. It just feels like an important scene in the movie to me, and I feel like you feel like Karen's anger and her hurt feelings in that scene. You know what I mean? And it's like over the top, like she's really ruining this woman's day, but it's a very understandable sort of moment for the character.
Very much so.
And it becomes important too, because I think that the next scene is when she's holding a gun to Henry, and I think if you didn't have that scene preceding it, it just wouldn't have had the power that it has as a scene. No. But I also like that the gun scene. So in the following scene, she's holding the gun at his face, and when she's first dating him and he gives her the gun, she talks about how the gun turns her on. Like most women wouldn't. They would stop dating the guy because he's dangerous or whatever. And she's like, I have to admit it turned me on. And then if you notice, that scene is very sexual, the way that it's depicted. Like there's a sensuality to it. It's not like anything happens. Yeah. But it's like she's in a very dominant position initially, and she's holding the gun to his face, but they're very clearly showing her legs. Like it's like a very and then she's much more submissive after that when he gets the gun. And it just it's shot in a way where it's like, okay, this is obviously meant. There's like some sexual undertone to this scene. And so I think that, again, that's like artistry of the movie, where they take that scene with the gun initially and sort of bring it to this scene. Do you know what I mean? Where, I don't know, just stuff like that in the movie I think is very again another reason why it's just so well made. But
That's perfect.
well, and it's also kind of a scary scene because you don't know if she's going to kill him, and his reaction is like the thing I like about his reaction in a scene like that is you get the feeling like he's this kind of guy that is very street smart and sort of knows how to survive, and he just has the correct reaction to her holding a gun to his head, so that he can diffuse the situation.
Yeah. It's part of how the psychology of the movie makes sense. I think all of the psychology in the movie makes perfect sense.
Well, I do. Yeah, I think in terms of like the character, like because the movie characters, the characters in the movie, they're often very larger than life, but they are based on real people. So even like the Tommy DeVito character, crazy as he is, the real guy is even worse. If you read the Pileggi book, like the scene with Spider is horrible, but in real life, I guess he was walking through the park with Henry, and he saw some guy that he knew for whatever reason. I don't know if the guy owed him money or whatever, but he said, "Hey, Henry, watch this," and he just walked over and murdered the guy. Which I mean is just that's even more crazy than the spider scene. And the spider scene is like the heart of the movie in a lot of ways because it highlights Tommy's psychopathy, but at the same time it's sort of it's the central scene where after that scene that's where it's like a pure descent into hell, and before that scene is kind of like all the glamour. But yeah, so I don't know, but I do think you're right. I think
wiped away.
What was that?
Yeah, all the glamour is wiped away with those scenes.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's funny because it's sort of like the social club is kind of the heart of the glamour itself. Do you know what I mean? So like you have the earlier depictions of the social club there's so many more people, there's so many more tables, there's so much more gambling and drinking, and then it's this one little room and it's just them, you know what I mean? It just feels like the world is tightening up, and the scene where they do things like dispose of the body of Billy Batts and they have to go back and dig it up, it's all very hellscape like. There's like red lights from the tail light sort of shining on them as they're digging into it's just very I've been reading the Inferno and I kept trying to think if there were any connections to it, just because and I couldn't really think of any that weren't superficial and meaningless. But but it's very clear that this is like a movie where they're on it's about, I know, Adam, I've often sort of you guys have had to put up with me having these pet theories about characters really being dead or in hell in movies. But this is a movie where it's obviously about his soul, and it's obviously about a figurative descent into. He's not literally in hell, but it's a metaphorical hell that he's descending into. And it's potentially an actual loss of his soul in the sense that he's, committed all these sins.
Yeah, a guy in my gaming group just got done reading Inferno this week, so I can't get away from Dante anywhere now. It's everywhere.
Go ask him. Maybe he can think of some points where it connects to great.
I'll do that.
Yeah, another thing I noticed this time that I never noticed before is
I'm
when
sure
they're
it does
cutting
somewhere.
I mean, it probably is. Well, one thing I thought of is Paul Cicero. They changed Paul Vario to Paul Cicero. Cicero does appear in the Inferno, but I couldn't really extract any meaning from it. He's in limbo in the Inferno. I'm like, I can't find a connective line between that and Paul Vario. But another scene that I really liked was, and I hadn't noticed this in prior viewings, was when they're cutting the cocaine in her apartment. They're using the two cards that they're cutting it with are a 6 and a king, and I thought that was somewhat significant because in Black, what was it?
Yeah,
he was coughing.
Yeah, I noticed too.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, what's interesting about it is in blackjack, what I've always heard is that if you get 17, you're supposed to hold. And so being one number shy of 17 means you can't hold. So you always have to keep hitting. And that's kind of what he's doing in the movie, you know, and if you're hitting at 16, that's the right thing to do. Yeah. But it's also a lot more risky because you're right up on that line of where it's still pretty easy to go over 21. So I don't know if that's why they put the 6 and the 10 there, or 6 and the king, but I thought it was interesting that kind of detail was in there.
That's a good theory to me.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of play to the character because that is his personality. He is kind of always I think we lost Matt there.
I think we did. We'll continue without him for now, but
see if you can...
he's back.
Are you back, Matt?
Yeah, the cat stepped on the computer.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a first. I don't think we've had that before.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably onto something with the card thing. I mean, even if your theory isn't exactly correct, I doubt this kind of movie. I doubt it was just random what cards they used for that scene. It just doesn't. It just seems likely there was a deliberate choice there.
Yeah, even if it's not blackjack and I'm off, I think it's definitely important in some way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did think that was fun. And I do like that again, like his personality is like that throughout the movie, where he's just kind of always hitting. You know, whereas if I were him, I would have been holding a lot more. You know what I mean? Like the moment Paulie said to me, "Don't touch the drugs," I would have not touched the drugs.
I would have done. Yes.
They all touch the drugs, Brendan. They all touch the drugs.
I know. They all touch the drugs. But Paulie told him not to, is my point. You know, and that's the thing that ultimately gets him in so much trouble is the potential that he's going to go away for so many years, and so they think he's going to rat, and that, you know, it's just a lot more risky. Yeah, but I suppose he probably didn't have much choice. Like he probably wouldn't have been able to be the earner he was if he wasn't involved in the drugs. So, you know, and then he would have had trouble on the other end. So, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, well, there's one set of rules for the bosses, and there's one set of rules for the soldiers. And Paulie might have even been slinging drugs for all we know, and they're pretty egregious, so it's likely.
Yeah, and Paulie was a captain, I think, in this movie.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's probably true. And also the movie does a really good job of illustrating that because, you know, like Karen doesn't quite get it. Like she thinks there's a rule and then he's suddenly breaking the rule or whatever. But he sort of understands how they have to be flexible in certain situations and not follow the rule to the letter in order to survive. And so there is this sort of weird double standard that they all kind of know about and accept. But then if you get caught, it's like for example, when he asks Henry about the murder of Billy Batts, and Henry doesn't tell him anything. Apparently, something that would often happen in real life in the mafia is if the boss asked you to tell him about somebody who did something wrong like that, if you had said, "Oh yeah, no, it was Tommy. Tommy killed Billy Batts," they would have gone and killed Tommy, but they also would have killed you for ratting Tommy out because that's considered a bad. So you're sort of in an impossible situation where you know. And I feel like you can sort of see, even though it doesn't explicitly state that in the movie, you can see that logic underlying. Like Matt was saying, the psychology is very believable. You understand that there's a thought process going on with Henry where he's doing all these things, and it's not necessarily just simplistic. We need him to do that for the movie to work. It's a real. There's like a reality to it. But there was another interesting thing. I never noticed this line either before.
Ancient traditions.
I'm sorry?
It's ancient tradition. It's pretty old.
Yeah, the Omerta and all that. Yeah, how old is that really? Like how I know it goes back to Sicily and like, you know, a bunch of wars that happened in I think like the 17 or 1600s. Does it go back further than that?
Yeah, well, they trace in a way, they trace the mafia back to the history of the Roman family, pater familia. So it's old. a lot of the traditions, at least, are old.
There's a line in, they kind of do it in a goofy way, so it doesn't quite land, but it ties to what you're saying. In The Sopranos, I think it was the first season. I could be wrong, but there's a scene where they say something about Rome, and the guy that I think they're about to kill him or do something horrible to him, and he's like, "Well, where's Rome? Where are the Romans now?" And they say, "You're looking at him." And I always felt that the way that they shot that scene just kind of made it feel a little bit goofy, but I did appreciate sort of the connective line that they were making to that.
Yeah,
where, it does.
There's a truth. Yeah, there's a truth to.
And also the feudal nature of the mafia, like you were saying, like the paterfamilias, and also the way that patronage worked and the way that they have tribute in, where they have to pay tribute to Paulie, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You could sort of see. That was another thing I really did like about it. You really understood. You could watch this movie, and we're all kind of gamers, so I think it's fair to discuss gaming. You could watch this movie and very easily, without watching anything else, kind of run a street level mafia campaign and you might not know all the details, but you would have enough material that would be gameable.
Yeah, well, it's funny actually. One of the movies I did see this year was Miller's Crossing, and that greatly influenced my role-playing game campaigns going forward. But yeah, there's two movies from this year that really had a huge influence on how I ran things.
The other thing I thought was interesting, they mentioned the airport thing and all of the how they would hijack the trucks and all that, and they mentioned this particular shrimp and lobster, and I thought that was interesting because my grandfather, when I guess he would bring back shrimp. He used to work at the Boston Tunnel, and he would come back from work with shrimp, and when his wife would ask where it was from, he would say it fell off a truck. And so my mom told me that must have meant that he bought it from somebody, like they were buying the cigarettes out of the back of the truck. So I just thought that was kind of fun because I guess that was like a real thing. I can't imagine buying lobster out of the back of a truck. That seems like a really bad recipe for
it's sold. They talk about the lobster selling fast. I'm like, well, I'm glad it sold fast. That's. Yeah.
There was another detail I noticed this time around that I thought was kind of funny. I never realized how significant it is that Henry is really kind of stuck between two worlds in this, where he isn't accepted by the mafia because he's not fully Italian. Like, he's not fully accepted by them. He's also not fully accepted by Jimmy Conway for being Irish. And because there's a line where I think Billy Bat says, "Get those Irish hoodlums a drink," and Jimmy Conway says, "There's only one Irishman here," so he doesn't acknowledge Henry as Irish, which I thought was interesting.
That struck me as well.
And I always felt that's why Henry's eyes. I think that's why he cast Ray Liotta, because his eyes are the thing that kind of set him apart from the other gangsters. Like, he has I don't know what color his eyes are. They're like blue or green or hazel or something, but they look like more Northern European or something like that. Like, they just kind of stand out. And I think that's why he draws attention to them when he's a kid. Yeah. And then a lot of the shots of Henry when he's an adult, the eyes kind of are highlighted in some way. Do you know what I mean? They just kind of stand out in the shot. And it's kind of a reminder that he's not like, he's not Italian. Like, I mean, I know that there are Italians with different colored eyes, but I just mean it's not, you don't associate that as strongly with being Italian as being dark-haired, dark-eyed.
Right.
And obviously, if you're from Northern Italy, there's more blonde people and all that. But still, I thought that was kind of interesting. Because I really hadn't noticed that line before. And I was like, wait a second, he doesn't consider him an Irishman. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, I think, I don't know, should we talk about the Tommy death scene? Huh? What were you saying, Matt?
It was kind of rude of him, to say he was the only Irishman in the bar.
Yeah, no, I agree. As a person with Irish heritage, I would be a little bit insulted. But I understand why he did it, like, and I understand, and I think it's a credit to the movie because it's so subtle that I've seen this movie year and year after year, and I never noticed that before. And so it was kind of like a new component to the film for me this time, where I never really thought of, and also the other thing I noticed once I noticed that, because I went back and watched the beginning again, there's a strong similarity between Robert De Niro and the guy who played his father. Like visually, they both look very similar.
Yeah.
And so, so I thought it was kind of notable for that reason. But yeah, I don't know. What about the Tommy death scene? The famous being made is my big day. And I remember how surprised I was when I first saw that scene. I don't know if other people were not. I was fooled by it. I don't know if other people saw it coming, but I was so shocked when that happened.
I was suspicious. I don't know. I mean,
what tips?
Yeah, I mean, just and being such a loose cannon too. I mean, there's just so many. I'm just like, this guy is such bad news. I was just, obviously there's the fact he did kill a made man, but just on top of it, I was like, I don't know. They're pulling this guy up to the top. It's he's very much the guy you only want as a foot soldier.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with that. I just totally bought. I remember. I mean, again, I was in 7th grade, so I don't know how I would have viewed it if I watched it for the first time when I was like 18 or something.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't see it till the mid '90s, so I was definitely older.
But I distinctly remember sort of you're just following them go into the room, and then they go in the room, and you're like, wait, something's off. Boom. You get shot in the head. And so it's like you have the same reaction that he has before he even has it. Like before he even says, oh, no, something's wrong. And that's what I really love about that scene. Yeah. And you don't know what it is. You just know it looks off. Yeah. And it's so violent, too. Like it's a really violent, sudden death. And it's funny because he's so terrible, but he's also weirdly very likable through the movie because he's kind of a jokester. So it's like you have this weird feeling when he dies where there's a sense of relief, but also a sense of sadness over it. Like you feel bad for him. And you feel bad for his mom because they made a point of putting that scene in where he has this like nice little moment with his mom when they're going on their way to bury Billy Batts.
But you couldn't even have an open casket funeral. Yeah. I mean, that's how I really felt bad for the mom. But.
Yeah, that's mean. Pretty cool.
But yeah, so I don't know any other
bad character.
What was that?
He was a bad character as a person, but he was still a human being, and you could argue he was trapped within a bad system.
Well, I guess it's the question of, and Sopranos does explore this, but I don't know that Scorsese would have been thinking this at the time because it wasn't really like a big topic the way that it was when The Sopranos was made. But if Tommy was a psychopath or a sociopath, and I guess the difference being that a psychopath is born and the sociopath is made by their environment. And so it does seem to me when I was looking at the earlier scenes when he's a kid, you do get the impression that he has more of a conscience when he's younger. So I think that you're right, Matt. I feel like maybe he was produced by something that happened during his development after that. Because what was that?
Yeah, they ruined him. They ruined him. People like Paulie ruined him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the thing is too with everything with him, it's just he just has this really deep insecurity. That's where everything comes from, which is it's like you can kind of see he is at some point in the past. It's like victimhood is really where all this. He's just got this rage from that.
Well, and again, obviously it's a deviation from the real person, but in the movie he's really short and he's living in he's operating in a world of tough guys where violence is the thing that governs everything. And you can imagine how that would make him feel insecure, and he would need to prove himself, even just as a matter of survival. Like maybe, like to us, it makes no sense that he would murder Spider in that way, but maybe he took it very seriously when Jimmy said, "Are you gonna let him get away with that?" Because if he did, maybe he felt that Jimmy would actually sort of view him differently. Do you know what I mean?
Jimmy should have known better. I mean, the fact is that Jimmy, it's like, what did Jimmy really think he was gonna do? It's like he knew Tommy. It's like it was. It's if he didn't want him to shoot him, that was really playing with fire.
And in fairness, I don't know that the behavior was strategic. It does seem more like a character flaw than a strategic sort of way of being. But it did work up until the point that he died, where people would just kind of leave him the fuck alone. Like Ray Liotta is his best friend, it seems, but he's terrified of him when he's joking about him saying he's funny. Like there's like legitimate, that is like one of the most tense scenes in the movie. And you thoroughly believe that Tommy could, just pull out a gun and shoot him or something. So
it's like I saw this movie for the first time and I didn't see it for many, many years. And I actually blurred those two scenes together. How am I funny scene with the one where he shoots the kid. It's like, I actually kind of conflated those two for a while.
I think they mirror each other a lot. I think
they do. They mirror. Yeah, like I say, I blurred them into one scene where it was like, I was thinking he had that conversation with the kid. Then when I watched it again, I was like, oh wait, no, I'm misremembering this movie.
Well, it's even a literal mirror because he's on the other side in that other scene, right? So in the first scene, he's on the left, and the second scene, he's on the right, right?
Yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah.
And Spider kind of looks like Ray Liotta. Like it's not that, like he's pretty close to him visually, so I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And also Spider played Christopher on The Sopranos, which I'm sure most people know. But and there was a callback to the foot shooting in The Sopranos. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean,
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, I've been trying to get a Sopranos episode up off the ground for ages, and it's just been impossiple.
We did some Sopranos episodes back in the day.
No, we talked about it. I don't think we ever did. Did we?
Yeah. We reviewed a couple of episodes. Somehow we trailed off into other things.
Okay.
Like we did it. We've done a few episodes of The Sopranos.
I'm pretty sure.
Many years back on the podcast.
Okay. I had a slightly different memory, but
I think we may have done it right after we did the Babylon 5 podcast. I think we went to The Sopranos after that, but I could have my details wrong.
Nice.
Well, Sopranos was tricky because
I think.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I think Scorsese directed the first Sopranos episode, just like with Boardwalk Empire.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure.
Check that out. See if you can find out if that's accurate or not, because that's interesting if it is. The first Sopranos episode, the first episode of The Sopranos stands out too, because it's like a little bit more comedic than the way the show became, and like the characters aren't quite as fleshed out, so it's just there's like a lot of weirdness to it.
No, David Chase directed the first episode of Sopranos.
Did Scorsese direct any of the episodes?
I swear he directed an episode.
He might. I'm scrolling through right now.
There was a fake cameo of him in The Sopranos at one point. I think it wasn't him, but they had like Martin Scorsese like get rushed into a limo in one of the scenes, and Christopher said he loved Kundun. So I don't know. Is there anything else we want to talk about with Sopranos? I feel like we've covered a lot of the. We probably missed a lot too. I'm sure there are a lot of scenes.
Yeah. I mean, but I've made my points for the moment.
All right, so I think we'll end it there, and we'll be back on. I don't know what movie we're doing next, but we'll be back on, and until then, we will talk to you later.